It's Our Story. Stephen Brown, Louisville, Kentucky.
One of the things that was really great for me at WID was that I met my wife. And there's a lot of, aside from the personal parts of that, there's a lot of aspects of meeting Lillian that relate to what we're talking about, which was Lillian had worked at CIL, the Center for Independent Living, in the late 70s and early 80s. And she had been involved actually in creating the first peer support training and the first skills training curricula for CIL. And then she went off in the early 80s and was doing some other things. And then there were a lot of people who were coming from other countries trying to learn about independent living. And so it just pretty much by accident happened that Lillian was very willing and was interested in meeting all these folks from other countries. And so she became one of the people who did a lot of the training for them. So in the 90s, I'll have to think about that. Actually in the 80s and 90s both, she did a lot of international traveling. And one of the things that happened when we met was I had been starting to think about and talk about disability culture and the idea that people with disabilities were creating a culture of our own. And when I first talked about that, a lot of people had passionate reactions to it that ranged from, that's a great idea, to there can't be such a thing. But Lillian got it right away. And one of the ways that she got it was that what she saw was that no matter what society you were in, what country you were in, people with disabilities had the same kinds of experiences, meaning that they had trouble finding a job, they had trouble finding housing, they had trouble getting transportation, they had trouble being integrated into society. And there were different aspects of different parts of countries, like in Scandinavia, for example, people with disabilities are fairly well off because the government funds them to live in housing and to have equipment. But what it didn't fund them to do was to be in the workforce. So a lot of the ways people in Scandinavia have put it is that they had services. In fact, I've heard many people from Scandinavia say that people with disabilities in the US live in barbaric conditions, and that's the word they use, barbaric. But at the same time, they envy the civil rights that we in theory have. So Lillian and I started talking about that kind of commonality that we had in looking at disability culture and different experiences. And at that point, I didn't have any international experiences aside from having been once in Mexico and once in Canada. And in Mexico, it was just over the border, and Canada, it was a trip with my family when I was a kid. So I really didn't have international experience, but since she had all that, and she'd been actually to a lot of different international places. So together we went and did some training and learning in Sweden and Hungary and Germany. So I began to meet people from other parts of the world, and one of the things that was really interesting in Hungary was that we were there doing a workshop, and we went to this city called Győr in, I have to think about that, Western Hungary, I think. Not sure I have that direction right. But anyway, it's one of the larger cities in Hungary, and we were doing a conference there. And people were talking about the downtown Győr, where there were buildings that still had steps, and people with disabilities couldn't get in. So the conference decided to stage a protest and go out in the streets and do a street protest. And that was the first street protest in Hungary by people with disabilities. And so that was an interesting experience. You know, people, it of course made the papers, and people were wondering what was going on, but it really empowered a lot of people with disabilities in Hungary.
The It's Our Story project is a national effort to make disability history public and accessible. Visit us at www.itsourstory.org or on the It's Our Story project YouTube channel.